chapter and had gotten to verse 7. Paul is discussing that the fact that God is just, that he is just to uphold the persecuted righteous. God is also just to punish the wicked. He has dealt with the wicked, that he's going to, verse 6, recompense tribulation or repay tribulation or affliction to those who trouble or afflict you. The you, of course, being those who are Christians, the Thessalonians in particular. Verse 7 now, he turns to the righteous who have been troubled. To you who are troubled, rest with us when the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels. Just as it is righteous or a righteous thing with God to afflict those who trouble or persecute the righteous, it is a righteous thing to comfort those who are afflicted, to give them, as it says here, rest. To you who are troubled, rest with us. Now then, this rest will come or will take place when Jesus is revealed from heaven with his mighty angels or his angels of power. And we'll discuss that more in a few minutes. But we wouldn't mention at least that there's no 1,000 years between these things. Between the rest and the tribulation that God's going to give, there's no 1,000 years, as the dispensationalist would have us to believe. In John the 5th chapter, verses 28 and 29, Jesus says, "Marvel not at this, for the hour is coming in which all that are in the graves shall hear his voice, and shall come forth. They that have done good unto the resurrection of life, they that have done evil unto the resurrection of damnation." So there's no 1,000 years separating the righteous and the wicked. That all will hear his voice, all will come forth. There's just no place for that 1,000 years that the dispensationalists want to put upon the Bible. The word rest. To you who are troubled, rest with us. It denotes, from a Greek word denoting a letting loose, relaxation, or easing, according to Vine. It's a noun, not a verb. It's only used by Paul in contrast with afflictions. To have afflictions, you have rest. Those who are afflicted will receive rest. So they have been that suffering affliction, and now then God is going to repay them. And I think it's interesting, rest with us. Paul puts himself in their situation. He's going to repay them with rest. Look at Hebrews, the 4th chapter, and verse 9. The Hebrews writer says, "There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God." There's the contrast that he makes the land of Canaan for the Israelites was a rest in that sense, but there still remained a rest. That physical land was not the goal. Again, dispensationalists want to center upon that land. Well, that land wasn't the goal. There still remains a rest for the people of God. In Revelation 14 and verse 13, passage often used in relationship to funerals, heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Write, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord from henceforth. Yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. Here's a resting from their labors. That is that eternal rest that the Christian has to look forward to, where he rests from his labors, but he also rests from the afflictions that he is suffering. It is that home with God in heaven. Now then, when is this going to take place, this rest? Well, Paul answers the question for us. When the Lord Jesus shall be revealed from heaven. The word when is the Greek word or preposition in, and if you have that sheet that I handed out of prepositions, you'll locate in the middle of the circle. Our good friend that Brother Tim likes, Spiro, Zohadius, I think, I'll never pronounce his name right, but he explains the in that you'll see there in relationship to a couple of other prepositions that you can locate. He says in, on, at, by, any place or thing, with the primary idea of rest, as compared with ice or ace, into or unto, and ek, out from, out of or from. It stands between the two. Ace implies motion into, and ek, motion out of, while in means remain in place. So if you look at that sheet of prepositions, you'll find a line from outside going in. Well, that's ace. You'll see a line starting from the inside of it and going out. Well, that's ek. And by the way, just another one that is going out, but it's not from within the circle, it's from the edge of the circle, would be apo. Both of them are from or away from, but the difference is a source of departure. One is from the edge of that circle, the other one's inside the circle. Ek is inside the circle and it's going out. So you have ace going in, ek going out. What about inside of it? If you remain there, inside, well, that's in. That's this word that's translated here, when. So in the Lord Jesus Christ, when he shall be revealed. This is a Greek word, apocalypsis. It's similar to apocalypse, apocalyptic language. We might be familiar with that from Wednesday night, if you remember back probably a few months ago. But it means simply revelation, a revelation. Thus the translation revealed. He's revealed. There's a revelation that is taking place. That's this Greek word apocalypsis. And it is used here of the Lord's coming. And we can deduct from that, first off, that it will be a visible coming. What was it back in, they claimed after the fact that Jesus had appeared secretly or invisibly back in, wasn't it 1914 or something like that? That doesn't meet what is stated here. It is a revealing, a visible manifestation. Go over to Acts 1 and verse 11, where it says, which also said, ye men of Galilee, why stand ye gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall so come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. If you remember the debate that we had here, Daniel Denham and Hogler Neubauer, one of the arguments that Daniel made was on this verse. It has to be a visible coming. They, of course, believed that it was not a visible coming, that he came in power in a destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Well, this revealing apocalypsis is one that where Jesus is seen. There is a visible aspect of it. It's not figurative language in that sense. In Revelation 1 and verse 7, John reveals that, behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him. And they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Well, every eye seeing him. Some want to, again, go back and say, well, that's figurative because not everybody can see it. Well, I just know that it will happen that way. Don't have to understand how. I just know that it will, where every eye will see him. Even those who pierced him. Well, they're dead, aren't they? But yet their eyes will see him. Why? Well, they'll be raised, for one thing. Now then, there's another word that Paul has used that comes into play here, and that's the word parousia. Parousia means coming or presence. He's coming as opposed to he is revealed. There's the presence that you have as opposed to his revealing. Revealed, according to Raymond Kelsey, denotes a disclosing or a revealing. And that's really what it is. Jesus is going to be revealed in the clouds where every eye will see him. It's going to be visible. Are there other comings of Christ that are not where he is seen? This means yes, and this means no. Parousia. Yes, there are many other comings of Christ. No, even after he had returned to heaven. Until
that time.
Until what?
Including his birth all the way down to he never even went back to heaven and stayed.
True.
That time period we're talking about.
No, I'm talking about after he returned to heaven.
Well, I am too. This when he came back in the cloud and talked to the You're talking about after the New Testament was written.
You came back and talked to Paul back in Acts 1:9-6, for one thing, and other times too.
Okay, there would be those times. But doesn't he come in judgment as one way? And doesn't Revelation chapter 2 and chapter 3, where he talks about those congregations that need to repent, or else I will come unto thee quickly and remove thy candlestick, for example, in Ephesus. That's a coming of Christ. Now then, it's not the same as the coming that Paul is talking about here, which what we refer to as the second coming. Those comings are figurative, but it's where God is coming in judgment upon someone, or in that case, a congregation. I'll say that I believe Revelation is primarily talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, or actually the destruction of Rome. In that case, there's Jesus coming in destruction of Rome, in destroying Rome. Others believe that it's talking about Jerusalem, and certainly Jerusalem in AD 70 would have been a time in which Jesus came to destroy Jerusalem. But there is a difference between those comings and the final coming, or what we refer to as the second coming. Okay, Carl.
What about during worship? Where two or more are gathered, I will be.
Well, that's misuse of the passage, but that has nothing to do with worship. You're referring to Matthew 18 and verse 20. That has reference to the exercising of discipline upon someone, but not worship. In fact, it would be contrary to not worship. For example, I'll give you two quick illustrations. Can you worship alone? Well, if you can, then that would violate and be contradictory to Matthew 18:20, where it says where two or three. Well, about 4 people or 20 people. But that's not 2 or 3, is it? The 2 or 3 is confined to that discipline action that he's talking about starting in verse 15. Now then, to the thrust of your question, is God with us during worship? Well, yes, I would say so. And any time, for example, in discipline, yes, God would be with us in the proper exercise of discipline. In fact, if you look at chapter 3, it is done by the authority of Christ. And in 1 Corinthians 5th chapter, it's done in the Spirit of Christ. So he is with them in that action. Well, in that sense, that's a coming of Christ in that action upon that individual or that congregation or whatever it might be. And so, yes, there are many figurative comings of Christ. This that Paul is speaking of here is not a figurative coming. It is a literal coming. That's why he's going to be revealed from heaven. There's that revelation, that appearing from heaven. And not just a figurative usage. And it is that which the angels told the apostles, that he will so come in like manner as ye have seen him go into heaven. They saw physically him going into heaven. He's going to come in like manner. What? Visibly, where they can see him in the clouds. That's not the only aspect of that, but that is one of the aspects of as he goes into heaven. It was visible. They were able to see him. And thus in Revelation 1:7, every eye shall see him, shall behold him. Then he's coming with his angels. The King James, you see, says, with his mighty angels. If you have some translations, the American Standard, for example, says the angels of his power. It's not a textual discrepancy. It is a decision of the translators in this case. Literally, the phrase is, with angels of power of him. Now then, the question, and here's where a translator makes decisions. The translator, or us, has to decide if the of him, with angels of power of him, goes with angels or with power. Now then, either way is true. It's not going to affect anything as far as what we believe. Whether you take it mighty angels or angels of his power. Both are true. Just the translator decides which one he believes that it goes with. But obviously, if power goes with Christ, and us, the angels of his power, well, Christ is the one who has all power, isn't he? Matthew 28 and verse 18, Jesus says, all power has been given unto me in heaven and on earth. So that is an accurate statement if we use it, the angels of his power. Well, that was my second point. He could have called 12 legions of angels. Well, what about the 103rd Psalm in verse 20? Let's just use that. Where it says, bless the Lord, ye his angels that excel in strength, that do his commandments, hearkening unto the voice of his word. They excel in speech, they that do his commandments. It cannot be talking about the Lord in that case. It has to be talking about the angels. Ye his angels. And thus they have power that do his commandments. So the angels have power as well. That's why I say it doesn't really matter in this case as to which way we take it, because both aspects are true. If it's the angels of his power, then yes, Christ has power, all power. Angels are mighty as well. They are mighty angels. They have power.
Well, isn't the Legion 6,000?
I believe Legion's 12,000. But don't hold me to that, but I believe that's what it is. Because sometimes I forget about all these numbers. So, was it 6,000? Okay, it might be. I lose track of all of the different terms in relationship to numbers.
That's the way I've always heard it. You could break 72,000, 6,000 times 12.
Okay. So that would be 6,000. So it might be correct.
It don't make any difference.
No.
You was gonna break
It would be a bunch and only need one.
Didn't even need it.
You 100 and something thousand, out there 37, 39, or wherever it was.
So these angels, though, that come, they are going to be sent forth to execute the commands of Christ in calling the dead from their graves and separating the righteous from the wicked. Someone read Matthew 13 and verse 41.
The Son shall send forth his angels, they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that are been, and them which do iniquity.
Now, and skip down to verse 49 and read that one as well.
So shall it be at the end of the world. The angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the just.
Okay. The angels being sent forth to do these things. Let's add chapter 25, verse 31 and 32 to that. Matthew 25, 31 and 32.
When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory, and before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as the shepherd divided the sheep from the goats.
Okay. So here's the angels being sent forth by Christ to execute his commands, calling the dead from their graves, separating the righteous and the wicked. And I'm going to give a little warning in this because I've seen some try to go to such lengths and extremes as to try and tell us every little detail that's going to happen, and God doesn't do that. He gives us information, the information that we need. And it might not fill every little detail in, but we know that the angels are going to have part of it. We know that they're going to be calling and executing God's commands and calling the righteous and the wicked, making a separation. How they do it, I don't know. And the Bible doesn't tell us. David Lipscomb, though, wrote, they are frequently, talking about the angels, they are frequently associated with Christ in connection with his redemptive and mediatorial work. They announced his birth, Luke 2, 8 through 14, resurrection, Matthew 28, 2 through 6, and return, Acts 1 and verse 10. They minister to him after his temptation, Matthew 4, 11, and in Gethsemane, Luke 22, 43. They will attend him at his return to judgment, Matthew 16, 27. And in that day, they will be called upon to worship him, Hebrews 1 and verse 6. Angels are mentioned so many times in the Scriptures. And yet, we study them very little and know even less about them. How do you apply for the job? Well, I don't think you'd want to. It's interesting that man is made a little lower than the angels, we're told in Hebrews 1. And yet, they minister to us, again in Hebrews 1. And when we are in heaven, they will be ministering unto us as well. So we will be above them at that time, even though we are below them at this time. And they, even though we are below them, they are ministering to us.
It says in Revelation 5, 8 to 14, there'll be 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands praising, was it praising Jesus or praising Yahweh, the Lord? I forget.
I don't remember offhand, but
Praising Yahweh. The one that sent Jesus.
The-
So of the world they gave. He sent.
and since we're talking a little bit about angels, it's interesting to me that there are some angels who fell. We find in 2 Peter 1, chapter 2. And yet they are reserved in Tartarus unto the judgment. Why weren't angels given an opportunity to be restored?
That's what they wanted to know.
Whereas man, he fell, but yet man has the opportunity to be restored and to fellowship with God.
Well, you explain that to us.
They probably already had their chance.
Now, you gotta know how to explain that to us.
If you want me to explain it, I can only give you my guess, which would be as good as anybody else's guess. I believe because they were in the very presence of God himself, that once they fell from that place, that there was no opportunity given to them to be restored. They had it, and we have never been to heaven. We have not been in that place. Therefore, when man fell, he was given the opportunity to be restored. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think that's what I think.
And when man gets to heaven, there will be no evil or anything to get.
There will be, okay, in heaven, there will be no, at that time, there will be no temptation to sin. And thus, no sin can enter into heaven or even in God's presence. Therefore, in heaven, we would be separated from sin and from temptation.
I used to wonder about Adam and Eve, they sinned, and what don't even do that in heaven? And we're told it's not going to happen.
We're told that heaven is immortal, incorruptible, cannot be corrupted. Well, sin corrupts. That's the very nature of it. And so there would be no sin in heaven. That gets you into a whole lot of other discussions and that are far too deep for us, for our understanding, put it that way. There are a lot of secret things that God does not reveal to us.
One of those things God said, that settles it.
Yeah. I know that that's going to be the case. Okay. It shows you how precious heaven is, but also it shows you how precious God considers humans. That he would give man a chance to redeem himself from iniquity, where angels did not receive that. The importance God places upon us.
If they were to work and bring it to them,
Yeah,
they can get access to it. Like that's what Peter did when he said they desired to look.
they desired to look into salvation, but I think that's dealing more with the Old Testament and the prophecies concerning the Messiah and the salvation that would come through him. At that time, even though they brought that message to the Moses and the prophets, they didn't understand it either.
So what you mean by that is that angels, even though they got involved in things like helping Lot get out and the other stuff they did,
Well, I don't think using Lot would be a good illustration of that, no.
We'll shoot it, I'm following.
If you used Isaiah 53, for example, that certainly would have been a good illustration. Did even the angels understand that? No. Did Isaiah understand it? No. It was written for our admonition. And so they looked into it. They searched diligently, but they couldn't understand it because without the coming of Christ. They did not know, obviously, God's eternal plan. So,
Do we have any knowledge of the angels have to go through a proving ground like we did?
no. We just have the knowledge that they exist for to minister to man and to accomplish God's purposes.
I mean, didn't the angel minister to Hagar there in Genesis chapter 16? He had a fountain of water or something other.
In certain ways, no doubt that what all angels are doing for us, and this is, let me first preface this with, we do not have guardian angels. And babies or children don't have guardian angels. That is a false concept. But angels do minister unto us. How do they do that? We don't know.
They were human at one time, right?
No.
No.
No, they were not humans.
No.
Never humans. No. No, there's no evidence of that. It would be very contrary to the very nature of what we see in relationship to angels. No, they were never human. God created the angels as angels.
You always thought they were like human at one time.
No,
God gave them the power to be an angel.
no. They were never human. But how God or how the angels minister to us today, I don't know. I know that they do because of Hebrews 1:14. But how they do that, I don't know. Do they guard us? Well, if something bad happens, what happened to that angel that's supposed to be guarding us? Yeah. That's why, we hear this guardian angel all the time. Well, it is a denominational concept that is false. Pam? Okay, in Old Testament, yes, they did. Angels generally, when we have an appearance of an angel, that it is generally as man. I don't know of any that appeared as a woman. They were always, but they did appear in human form. Did not mean that they stayed that way. And yes, Hebrews 13:2 does teach us that we can entertain angels unawares. There's a lot of discussion about the meaning of that passage. I'll just put it that way. It could have reference to, does it have reference to actual angels, or is it simply the meaning of the word angels? The Greek word angelos very simply means a messenger. Could it be, instead of an angel, simply a messenger in that case? Unawares that he's a messenger with a message. I'm trying to decide if I'll give this illustration or not. I guess I will now. And Karen almost killed me at the time. And y'all probably would not have blamed her. But had this telephone call. That's before we were here. And somebody, the only motel in town was not a very good motel. She knows who I'm talking about, too. And so I went out and met with the person. I brought them home. And they spent the night with us. Never met the person, met the man. He was a truck driver. And on his way back to home, as we talked, he happened to be a preacher in the Lord's church as well. Knew several faithful brethren. Came by and visited us a few more times after that. So at the time, I guarantee you, she didn't know who he was, didn't know his name, didn't know anything about him. Just, I'm bringing him home. And he's spending the night. She wasn't too happy with me. And I said, y'all probably. No, that would have been a possibility. The age of miracles ceased. But he became we finally came to know that he was a preacher. Was he a messenger that we didn't know about? Messenger of God? Well, yes. We didn't know about him at that time. Not until talking to him more and more. So, yes, it's a possibility. And of course, in that time frame, there's a lot of difference between the hospitality then as opposed to now. Then they built a house or a room onto their house for people to stay. Anyone who came into town, they were offered the room for them to stay in. So we have motels or hotels now in which people stay, and so there's a difference in the way in which that hospitality is shown. Now then, as I said, there's a lot of discussion as to whether that's actual angels or simply the general term of messenger. It could be either one. Context usually determines, and context is not a great help there. Very true. I mean, a lot of, in years past, a lot of times that's the only way in which people travel. Mm-hmm. How many picked up years ago hitchhikers, and sometimes even trying to teach them the truth, which I've done. That was before I got married, though. But there might be a messenger unaware. In many of those cases, it would have been. So, yeah. We'll start with verse 8 then, Lord willing, next week.